We are now at the beginning of the second major section of issue number 1 of the primer, an introduction to ICTs for development. This section is basically one that looks at the applications of ICTs in various sectors of development. So, I will take you now on a journey through a set of examples in how different countries have tried to use ICTs to address different development goals. Again, not all the examples that are given in your text will be presented to you here. You would have to, and I would recommend very strongly that you do, that you read the text alongside this presentation. While the major examples will be presented, there are a lot more examples that are suggested in your text, which are referenced, to which you can go to the websites for a lot of additional information, and I strongly recommend you do that. Again, with cases that I am presenting, I think it would be a good idea if you would go to your text and go to the source from which the case is taken, so that you can yourself evaluate for yourself the application of ICTs in this particular case, in this particular sector of development. So, the overall learning objectives of section 2, which consists of 4 chapters, basically has to be to introduce learners and to introduce you to the concept of what are direct and what are indirect applications of ICTs. The idea also is to introduce you to case studies in the use of various ICTs in various development sectors. So, we will be looking at cases across the Asia Pacific region, and in 1 or 2 instances we even have cases from outside the region. But essentially, after going through this section, we hope that you will be able to understand the application of ICTs in specific cases. We hope you will be able to identify such cases in your own country context, and we hope that you will be able to analyze such cases in terms of success or failure. So, let us begin by looking at the actual application of ICTs in development, in sectors of development. There are, of course, many players in the ICT for development space. Remember, I told you about how multilateral and international agencies are involved in promoting ICTs for development. Similarly, governments are also engaged in promoting ICTs through e-governance policies and ICTD policies. Similarly, non-government organizations or NGOs are working at the grassroots level in villages and communities to bring about the benefits of ICTs. Again, private sector is not far behind, and as part of its corporate social responsibility to give back to the community what it can, there are private sector institutions also working in the use of ICTs for development. Each of these work within their different special sectors and within their given mandates. Sometimes they work independently and sometimes they work together. But whatever it is a combination of a variety of stakeholders who are coming together in order to be able to deliver and to provide access to services. So, let us look at some of the stakeholders in the ICTD space, particularly as it may be in a given country. First and foremost, we have the policymakers. The policymakers are those officials in government responsible for making policy, legislation, for making projects and for making programs, for designing these in order to implement these and provide services to their citizens. But government does not necessarily run telephone exchanges or mobile services. Government does not necessarily run electricity boards and provide electricity directly. These services are in turn provided by service providers with whom we interact on a day-to-day basis, either in terms of our electricity complaints, either in terms of paying our bills, or in terms of getting better service. So, the direct link between the citizens and the service and the government and the policy makers is very often through the service providers. Citizens in a democratic society influence policy makers through articulating their interests. But citizens have a difficulty in reaching policymakers directly because it is a slow process. Therefore, the most common interaction is for citizens through service providers. Although citizens can articulate their interests through elections and other means to policymakers, this is a longer and more difficult route. The most visible relationship is when the service provider provides a service to the citizens, and that is where we interact. It could be the water supply, it could be electricity supply, it could be taxation, but it is generally the service provider interacting with the citizen. And it is important to remember this, because government is a huge superstructure and one has to be able to separate its different elements in order to understand the relationships. When we do this, and when we begin to look at using ICTs in various development sectors, across the board there have been two major approaches to using ICTs. The first one is a direct approach and targets the ultimate beneficiaries. In this approach, the belief generally is that if you provide access directly through an ICT, that it will result in an immediate benefit. And this is where ultimately it is the link between the individual, perhaps a user of the mobile phone, and maybe information or market. The very presence of the ICT creates opportunities for benefits. The second kind of approach to the deployment of ICTs is not directly in terms of beneficiaries, but is a more supportive function to the coordination of systems and development of policies, infrastructure, people and content. That is, to enable better administration for efficiency and effectiveness, which in turn is expected to benefit the ultimate beneficiaries. Both approaches are critical to the achievement of the goals, but each has a different design. But at the same time, the two approaches may be used alone, independently, or they may be used together in order to optimize the benefits. So let us look at all applications in terms of these two approaches, and in all instances I have tried to provide you with one example of a direct intervention and a second example of an indirect intervention. We now look at, in chapter 3, ICTD applications in core development sectors. Why are these the core? Because these are the first 4 goals listed in the Millennium Development Goals, which address poverty and poverty related sectors directly. These 4 sectors are agriculture and poverty reduction, education, gender and health. Go back to the listing of the goals in your textbook. Goal 1 to 4 all are related to, goal 1 to 6 in fact are related to agriculture, education, gender and health. Health has 4, goal 4, goal 5 and goal 6. Take a look at these goals and take a look at these as core development sectors. Evidence suggests today that the previous paradigm where we talked about private sector led growth supported by ICTs would benefit poverty reduction. This has not been proven true. It has sometimes helped to reduce poverty, but most of the time the poor people have benefited less from this type of development than from any other. Therefore, governments need to address poverty directly in order to reduce it and to alleviate it. What does poverty mean? It is very context specific and it is relative to a given country context. For instance, what is poor in China may not be what is poor in Korea. What is poor in India may not be the same as being poor in Bangladesh. However, while it is context specific, major features of poverty mean a lack of income, a lack of access to jobs, a lack of access to land, lack of access to loans and credit, lack of access to services that are provided, a regular experience of hunger, not having enough to eat and not having enough of the right food to eat, lack of access to education and health care, low life expectancy, high infant and maternal mortality, and an increased vulnerability to disasters and conflict. Very often, because one doesn't have money or one doesn't have income, you find that it is often because of lower education levels. So, if you don't have access to education, you cannot earn income. If you don't, if you are not well, you also cannot work. If you are not well, you cannot work. If you cannot work, you don't have money. If you don't have money, you cannot send your children to school. You cannot pay for health care, with the result that you lack access to the critical services of education. Because you cannot afford medicines, your life expectancy goes down. There are higher infant and mortality rates, and if there is a disaster or a conflict, because you don't have a fallback measure, the poor are increasingly vulnerable. So, it is a vicious cycle of poverty which blends both in lack of income, education, hunger and health care. The result of this is that depending on the approach we take, we prioritize as to what it is that we are going to do. However, in trying to understand poverty, the general way has been to improve income generating capacities of the poor, so that they have additional income which they can then use to access services. I will be giving you two examples, both of which I have personally visited and seen. In India, the Reuters Market Lite is the first mobile phone based, highly personalized professional information service that is specifically designed for the Indian farmer community. To use this service, a farmer needs to purchase a prepaid card, a subscription, with a value of about $5 for 3 months. He can buy it from any convenience store, from any rural outlet. He uses this card, subscribes to a service, and then is able to get information that will directly benefit him. The biggest change has been that it has provided farmers with timely knowledge of market rates, weather information, of pesticides, of crop infestation, and the model has been proved to be both financially and socially sustainable. That means in all the villages where farmers have mobile phones and have subscribed to their services, they themselves have vouched for the fact that this service, personalized information service called RML or Reuters Market Lite, has made a difference to the income that they earn and to the quality of their lives. They check it first day in the morning, even to find out whether it will rain or not. So, weather information, crop information is all brought to them in a timely manner, and it is succeeding right now. The second major example of an indirect intervention, the first one of RML was a direct intervention. The second major example, and this is of the indirect intervention, is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Take a look at your textbook and go to the website. Essentially, what was done was that the government of India decided to address poverty directly by providing 100 days of guaranteed employment to one member of the family in every very poor location. In order to run this massive program in India, there was now no other option except to use innovation through ICT. An ICT end-to-end solution is now used for planning, tendering, tracking work in a particular community. The villager can go to, with a little help, can find out where the work is, can find out where she should get the work, can find out how much money has been paid, can find out how many days of work have been done, and he can go and find out how much money is there in his savings account at the post office bank. Without the ICT intervention to support the administration and implementation of this program, it could not have achieved the results it has achieved. It is ongoing, it is at a national level and a state level, and has dramatically transformed the ability of the poor to have additional disposable income. A third project that I am going to talk to you about which actually looks at the way in which different IT elements have been combined to make a successful intervention, is the Ninja ICT project in China, done between 2007 and 2008. The idea here was that in this project, which was supported by the Chinese government, develop an internet protocol TV system, a comprehensive website, a call center for farmers, and a village information center. With each medium, each tool serving a specific function. The information website provides information on agriculture, markets, weather, financial instruments. Call centers provide voice and video support. The village information center provides a ready access point for facilities for the farmers to download and upload information. And an impact assessment of this project that was done in 2010 actually showed that the results of the ICTs varied among different groups, but education was a key factor in determining the use of ICTs. But yes, people were turning to ICTs for information when they found that these technologies met their needs. As important as addressing information needs of poor directly, and as important as supporting administrative and delivery systems in governments, is of providing the vital knowledge that scientists need in order to be able to program and develop better implementation mechanisms. The Enwrap, which is the networking for the Asia and Pacific, which is funded again by the International Fund for Agricultural Development and the IDRC in Canada, essentially looks at providing a database and a knowledge sharing portal for agricultural scientists, for researchers, for extension workers. So it is working actually not at the grassroots, but at a more academic level in providing information when and where it is needed to a closed user group. This in turn would benefit the knowledge that would be shared by these scientists in lab to land activities. So there is enough evidence to show that there is not a direct connection between ICTs and poverty reduction, but interventions have to be of a different kind and they have to be done differently. When we begin to look at the application of ICTs in education, one of the first things that comes to our mind is the fact that no one is very clear about what ICTs in education means. There is confusion. In some countries, it means the creation of a pool of human resource to cater to the growing knowledge society needs. In other countries, it means ICT supported education, such as distance learning. In some other places, it means ICT enabled education, meaning ICTs is the primary channel of educational interaction, e-learning or m-learning. But rarely has ICT education been understood as ICT for development education and the deployment of ICTs to address development goals. But the use of ICTs in education and its impact is second only to the impact of ICTs on business practices. The key issues that plague developing country attempts are access, equity, resources and quality at all levels of the educational process. But there are opportunities, and I would recommend that you look at this list of opportunities and benefits closely to see the benefits that ICTs can bring in education. So let us look at some of the activities that are taking place. We find, as we look through the Asia Pacific region, that there are open and distance learning models, there are school nets, there are open educational resources, learning object repositories, and the use of ICTs in and outside classrooms. Let me give you examples of some of these. Some of the sectors in which ICTs are used are formal education in schools, formal education at the university level, non-formal education and teacher training. Informal education in the schools and looking at models of distance learning, the open schools of the Asia Pacific are well known for increasing access. Remember, I talked to you about key issues: access, equity, quality and resources. The open schools of the Asia Pacific, whether they are in the National Institute of Open Schooling in India, the eSkwela project in Philippines, the Bangladesh Open School or the Sri Lanka Open School, all have provided access to education for larger numbers while maintaining a standard level of quality, and they have done this by using ICT tools available to them. These photographs from eSkwela in the Philippines and a detailed description of this case is given to you in the text, basically provides an opportunity for out of school youth, people who have dropped out of school, to go back to school and to learn again and to get the competency certificate, which allows them then to go on for further education. These are two pictures from eSkwela. I would recommend that you read the text about the case study and that you go to its website to see how this very interesting experience is working in the Philippines. The best and the most well-known case of using ICTs in higher education is that of the University of the South Pacific, which actually is a consortium made up of members from 12 different countries. The Pacific area is home to so many countries, about 33 million square kilometers plus of open sea and few islands with small populations, and 12 of these countries have come together to create the University of the South Pacific, which since its beginning, since the 70s, has been exploiting satellite based television and later on through the USB net, the ICTs extensively to deliver access to education, no matter how far, no matter how few, no matter which country in the Pacific region. A very interesting example of higher education of high quality. Again in the Pacific, examples of Solomon Islands where rural centers are set up so adults can learn what they had not learned earlier through a formal system. Not just adult literacy, but enrichment, information that they can gather from using technology to source information. The use of ICTs in teacher training. Now, when we look at education, we look at the teacher very often as the gateway to the student. We cannot approach the student directly, and sometimes when we approach the student directly, we also have to go through the teacher. And the reasons why we have to do it is because if the teacher is not empowered to understand the use of ICTs as a new teaching and learning paradigm, they will not be able to keep pace. Therefore, it is necessary for teachers to make use of the latest resources, to become those who encourage students to think critically, promote information literacy and work collaboratively. Therefore, the role of teacher has changed from the source of all information to a guide who helps a student learn through the various sources of knowledge that come to the student. There are many examples in the Asia Pacific region, and these are again referred to in the textbook, and in the references you will see that UNESCO Bangkok has at least 15 case studies. Look them up to see if there are any case studies in teacher education from your own country, because I am sure there are. A third aspect of core development goals is really looking at gender issues in development. Whenever we begin to talk about gender, among the things that stands out is that these are very, very deep-rooted issues. They become emotional. Gender issues are embedded in the social fabric of societies. But unless there is equality between men and women, boys and girls, if there is inequality, unless there is equality, there is no growth. So, gender disparities have a debilitating effect on overall growth, but nobody is very clear about what to do about this, and there is not enough data available in the Asia Pacific region. There are many reasons, particularly in the developing world, why women do not access ICTs. They are the same as the reasons why they do not access other sources of improvement, such as education. Illiteracy, lack of awareness, poverty, not having time, low confidence, limited mobility, physical safety, lack of relevance, barriers to access in terms of cost, location, support, and because the benefits of development projects have not really reached women. But there are cases where in small experiments, women are being used to use ICTs to improve their own communities. The info lady in Bangladesh, for instance, is a trained rural young woman who visits households in villages with a set of ICTs. So, a small portable laptop, a digital camera, a mobile phone, GPRS, internet connectivity, and some other little tools for weight measurement, blood test, blood pressure machine, pregnancy test, sugar test kit, etc. She listens to the villagers' problems and helps them by either through offline Bangla information, or she consults the web, surfs the web, finds the information and then consults with experts and then brings the information back to the woman who has solicited that information. It's an interesting experiment of using women in order to bridge the gender gap. Salam Vanita, which brings together women who work from home in an effort to improve their learning abilities, in an effort to improve their income generating capacities, is an experiment in Malaysia that has been going on for the last 10 years very, very successfully, as women who are in this network not only get information on how to earn extra income while sitting at home, but at the same time they learn new sets of skills. Networking among women in order to reduce gender inequality, and also because the internet based communication is a safe place for women to talk to each other. And in Sri Lanka, the Center for Women's Research has helped to network and bring people together in order to communicate among themselves. In the fourth core sector, which is ICTs and health, there are some key stakeholders. The key stakeholders, and it is important we remember them, because you and I as ordinary people are also stakeholders. You and I are also stakeholders because we go to a doctor, we get sick. At the same time, ordinary people, marginalized and vulnerable groups are also equally stakeholders. So, they are the beneficiaries of the health services. On the other end, we have the healthcare providers, the policy makers, doctors and professionals such as nurses, caregivers at primary health level are among the stakeholders. Both sets of groups require the support of ICTs. The most common use of ICTs in medicine is in telemedicine, and telemed in Pakistan is one example where a patient in a rural hospital is connected to an urban hospital through a through a technology link which enables transfer not just of voice but also of data through x-rays, medical tests, and also that the doctor in the city can give expert advice. Among the most backward countries today is Afghanistan in terms of development, and even in Afghanistan telemedicine is proving a boon as hospitals from Kabul are linked to rural communities, and patients in rural communities can get the wisdom from doctors in the city. Supporting doctors in terms of continuous medical education and access to timely information is HINARI, or the Health Internetwork Access to Research Initiative. Targeted specifically for health professionals, it allows them to access more than 3,500 journals containing the latest information on health practices throughout the world. This enables it, in turn, a doctor to provide better services to the patients. So, in these 4 sectors, the basic sectors of poverty reduction, education, gender and health, these are all closely linked. There are 2 ways in which ICTs have been used, either in terms of ICT driven technologies such as telemedicine or the mobile phone, or ICT supported in terms of either delivering knowledge sharing or administering programs. Applications in agriculture and rural development often have been able to provide direct access to market information and also provide knowledge support to experts. And at the same time, management information systems such as in the NREGA of India have helped improve efficiency and effectiveness in delivering services. In education, the use of ICTs has been to enhance access and to maintain the quality standards while ensuring the best use of resources for formal, non-formal and teacher education. For women, they offer new opportunities for communication with each other, for providing valuable information, and also for home-based e-commerce opportunities. And ICTs are also a sector in which a large number of women from developing countries have found income generating activities through call centers. The most frequent application of ICTs in healthcare is in telemedicine, followed by continuing medical education and improving the quality of research networks. Look at these case studies, go to their websites. It seems clear that the same ICT can be used for multiple purposes. So, if you have a knowledge center in a village, that same network can be used for agriculture, health, education. So, there are multiple uses. Based on the case studies, answer the questions that are given in the rest of this slide. Can it be used? Can you find a project in your own country where this has been done? Can you prepare a case study on it? And can you discuss this case study? Think about it. As we come to the end of chapter 3, I would like you to reflect on these core sectors of development. We will now be moving to the next chapter in this sequence.